Coming up in today's show, Elky shows us how to set up your kettle barbecue for low and slow cooking. Our special guest is David Carter from Smokestak, one of London's hottest barbecue restaurants. On his kettle grill, Neal creates a tasty paella. In Dish of the Week, Elky cooks 3 amazing cuts of meat from Philip Warren Butchers. We announce the winner of our What's Cooking competition, and we go on a journey around the barbecue community to take a look at what you've been cooking. Welcome to the Lockdown BBQ Show. Welcome to the 17th Lockdown BBQ Show. We've got another action-packed programme for you today. Now, Elky, can you believe we've been making the show for more than 4 months?
I can't believe that, no. 4 months, yeah, I mean, it's absolutely flown by, but I can't believe that we've knocked out 17 episodes every week on the bounce without so much as a break. So I think we're long overdue one. Maybe.
Now, Elky, would you like to introduce our special guest?
Yeah, so our special guest this week is David Carter from Smokestak. Now, I actually ate at Smokestak just before lockdown. My missus treated me there for my 40th birthday. The food was absolutely amazing, and I actually tried to recreate some of it later on in the show, but we'll catch up with that a bit later on my Dish of the Week. But this week's guest is David Carter from Smokestak.
David, welcome to the Lockdown BBQ Show. We're going through strange times. How have the last few months been for you?
Yeah, strange times indeed. I think it's a bit of a roller coaster for like everybody else. You know, I don't think anybody envisioned it would be a 4-month lockdown. I think in the beginning we were quite unemotional about it, to be fair. It was sort of bigger than any of us. The silver lining is I've got a little boy, so I've got to spend loads of time with him. He's only 18 months, so it was great in that aspect. And then I think once it sort of became apparent that this wasn't going to be a blowover, then we kind of started playing around with sort of takeaway to kind of keep things intrigued, keep the guys on payroll, and it's been all right actually. I mean, all things considered, I've really enjoyed it in some ways, to be fair, but definitely prefer being back to the grind now. Definitely prefer being back to work and the sort of signs of normality. Not quite the same yet, but it's getting there.
We'll come on to Smokestak shortly, but before that, you was at Claridge's and Roker. What made you kind of swap fine dining for barbecue?
I think, you know, a high standard is a high standard. You know, when I went to university to study hospitality, I was quite fortunate that I knew I was going to do this industry at a young age, and I pursued to the university and everything else. And straight out of university, I wanted to work for the best. And, you know, I joined Four Seasons, being a 5-star hotel. And especially known in North America, probably more so than it is in Europe, as an elitist brand. And I want to work for the best. So I joined those guys in LA, and then I came over here with Ramsey at Claridge's, did that for a little while in Rocca. And I think, you know, anywhere that I guess my career is kind of taking me, or, you know, I've always strived to be the best. And best doesn't mean better than anybody else. It means the best of your ability. It means kind of pushing yourself for excellence. And, you know, I'm not trying to compete with anybody else per se, but I'm definitely trying to serve a product we're proud of and that we believe in, and that's the best of its ability. So the transition, you know, I guess going from, you know, a very structured environment into sort of street food was huge. But I think the plan was always to do my own restaurant. So I knew that I was going to do this for 20 years now.
You kind of went from the fine dining into street food, and obviously you started Smokestak in 2013, I think it was, and had a few years doing the street food scene before opening your restaurant. Tell us the differences between the kind of street food and the bricks and mortar restaurant.
Well, I think we kind of started off in 2013 thinking we were late to the party. I thought street food kind of, you know, was at its height then, and I didn't realize that it was now about to boom. And we joined at the top of the wave, so to speak, and we kind of rode it down for a good couple of years. So it was great fun. And I think we only did it, the idea was to do it for one summer, then open the restaurant. That summer then turned into, I was still employed in 2013. 2014, I jumped ship to commit full time. And we did it for 3 summers, well, 3.5 summers, I guess, full time doing sort of events and festivals, and I guess building up our brand, building up cash flow, building up the ideas, refining the concepts. And then in 2016, we were looking for site experience the entire time. Obviously, you know, in 2014, 13, we probably didn't have the cash flow for it, and then kind of built it up and built up the brand. And, you know, it all happens for good reason. And then I think we found the site around 2015. It took a good year of negotiating, building, planning, licensing and everything else to kind of get your doors open. So it took a little while, but once it became a thing, it was an opportunity. We just went for it.
How different is Smokestak to the likes of Claridge's? Is it worlds apart?
Yeah, it's worlds apart in many ways. You know, it's you know, I loved working at that sort of high end where, you know, you don't accept mistakes, you know, not from yourself and not from anybody else. It's sort of super, you know, it's very, 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 you know, very fine lines, and it really tries to be excellent. Whereas Smokestak, we try the same way, but you have to have a more casual approach. It's obviously, you know, we're not serving, you know, meals at 100 quid a head. Obviously volume's a lot higher. It's just a different setup altogether. But I think, again, it always goes back to sort of, you know, wanting to be to excellence, I think. And I think that's what we've always strived for. And that's sort of, I guess, the defining thing. And Smokestak is much more restaurant, I guess, for my demographic. You know what I mean? I'm 35 now. And our average demographic in restaurant, I'd say, is 25 to probably 40. A younger crowd, the restaurants I've worked for in the past, they're probably a bit more my parents' age, a lot more cash flow, a bit more settled in life. And Smokestak is a bit more chilled and it's a bit off the cuff, a bit more relaxed. And I think most restaurateurs or most people, they generally create a restaurant they'd want to go to. You know, and Claridge's is a great restaurant. I loved it, don't get me wrong, as Savoy, as Rocca, but their restaurants more so that I guess are built on the owner's sort of vision. Smokestak is much more, I guess, you know, what a place I'd want to go to, and a place I'd want to go to sort of 4 or 5 times a week, not once a year. Whereas restaurants I've worked for in the past are largely, you know, Rocca not so much, but certainly Savoy and Claridge's are very special occasion restaurants. You go there for the anniversary, for your birthday, but it's not sort of your choose your lunch type of thing. So difference in that sense. But again, I think, you know, I've always wanted to kind of, you know, push myself to be best as we can be, really. And that's sort of, I guess, the common thread.
David, have you had to adapt Smokestak during lockdown?
Interesting. I mean, I think we were kind of one of the fortunate ones in terms of, I don't think this was ever going to capsize a business. And I think we started coming up with kind of takeaway. And I think the idea for us was largely, how do we bring the team back? How do we kind of make the guys feel so, you know, part of the operation? And it's all well and good to kind of shut the doors and open up months later, but we wanted to bring the guys back in some sort of format. And because we'd done events before, because we'd done sort of street food, because we'd done festivals, we were relatively well versed in that type of setup, that type of operation. So there's a barbecue place in the States called Snow's in Lexington, and they're open on Saturdays only. And we said, look, let's do a carbon copy of this in terms of it's just a Saturday only barbecue, and we just smoke meats. There's no grills involved. We have a takeaway, and that was a big success. Came out huge, and it did quite well. But again, it was only 1 day a week. But that way, we could bring back our 4 most senior guys: head chef, sous chef, GM, and number 2. And then that way, we can kind of really keep the guys kind of on payroll and ticking over. And it was great. And then obviously DIY came after that, and that's still going on now, to be fair, but it's my DNA is very much restaurants, and, you know, to serve people in front of you, to, you know, see the reaction, to feel the adrenaline of service, that you can't replicate packing that in a box. There's no way. So don't get me wrong, it's been sort of quite exciting to kind of do different things and test ourselves and test our creativity. But, you know, it's a restaurant is my thing for sure.
How has the Eat Out to Help Out scheme gone down at Smokestak?
Honestly, it's been a complete home run. I think for most restaurants, I think the restaurant right now sits about 60. If we had, I'm not even joking, if we had 500 tables, we'd book them every night. It's been, the demand is silly. And I think this is for all my industry colleagues and friends. It's just been, it's been huge. And so, of course, it's a false economy. So, you know, we're going to have a mega Monday to Wednesday for the next week and the Monday after that. But then after that, we're going to have sort of reality. So it's definitely going well, especially in evenings. And it's oversubscribed, which is a great problem. And we've set record numbers Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday repeatedly. If at the end of the day, this whole scheme has managed to get people out of the doors to restaurants and to prove that it's safe to eat for 10 quid off, then hopefully they can do that without the 10 quid. You know what I mean? And if that's what it's achieved, then it's been absolutely brilliant.
So, David, I was lucky enough to visit Smokestak in January before the madness began, and I sampled a fair bit of your menu, and it was absolutely banging. So how important is it to start with good quality ingredients from the off?
I think, you know, especially when you're dealing with a very simple sort of product like ours, it's paramount, really. I mean, a good example is brisket is our most popular dish by a long mile, then followed by beef rib, and we simply salt and pepper it, and we chuck it in the smoker. Granted, it can be anywhere between a 7-hour cook for the short rib and up to sort of 16 hours for the brisket. But, you know, we literally are taking a product and we're literally just putting in, you know, basic seasonings on it and going in the smoker. I'm
going to be cooking a Smokestak box from Philip Warren's actually on this show. Yeah. So have you got, I think it's the brisket, the rib and the pork collar. Yeah. So have you got any tips for me?
Well, what will happen with the product, it'll go through a stall. when it gets around sort of 70 degrees. And I think what you need to do is just make sure you kind of be patient with it. A lot of people kind of try and adjust the temperatures and start to fight it. It's just a very, very natural thing that happens with the meat. It gets around 70 degrees and it kind of holds it holds firm. And then the second thing as well is once you have enough color on the product, you want to wrap it in butcher paper. Also the port in foil. I mean, it's the reason being is that you'll get an amazing bark on your product. But if you don't wrap it after a certain point, that bark will turn into crust. It's almost like toast. You know, toast gets to the point where it's like, it's amazing. But if you keep continuing to cook it, it just gets burns on the outside. It's the same thing with a brisket or same thing with a short rib. It'll continue to cook. So you just want to make sure that you kind of wrap it around, I would say 80-85% of the way cooked through, and just let it finish gently and then rest it. I would say rest the product for, if you can do an hour, do an hour. If you can do 2 hours, do 2 hours. But you really, because it's wrapped in well, it should come out wrapped actually in butcher paper or foil. That will keep the temperature inside the product, and it's sort of, you want to pull the product out almost before it's cooked, and then it will continue to cook slowly, and then the juices will sort of get back into the product. So be patient with it.
Good solid advice, and hopefully I'll do it justice.
David, you've introduced Smokestak at home. Can you tell us about it?
We started obviously doing takeaway, and takeaway is brilliant, but we're limited to sort of a couple of miles with any restaurants for delivery. And we kept getting requests to kind of, can you deliver here? Can you deliver here? And I think it was sort of Patty and Bun and Burger and Beyond. Those guys were sort of the first ones, and maybe Pizza Pilgrims, the first pioneers that came out the blocks and launched obviously this sort of DIY stuff at home. And we said, well, look, you know, it will probably work well for our product. The reason being is to kind of smoke meat, you need, you know, time, 15 hours up to. You need a backyard potentially, and you need a smoker. There's a lot of people in the country that probably don't have all three. So because of that, we said, look, let's come up with something that we kind of get all over the country. So we started doing it, and it's gone well. It's gone really well actually. It's a challenge for sure, because you know we put the product all together, and then we sort of outsource it to third parties to get delivered. So couriers and so forth, and it's sort of a bit damning when the product comes out the restaurant, we know what it looks like, and it gets to you and it's a bit bashed up, but it seems to go on well, and you know we're able to get it to people, you know, way up north and way down south. So it's definitely making sure the product is more accessible for sure.
Do you think the future for restaurants will be this mixture of home deliveries and visitors to the restaurant?
Honestly, no. I think restaurateurs get into restaurants for a reason. There's a certain romance to restaurants. There's a reason we do it, the adrenaline, the service. You can't replicate what we do into a box. You can't replicate the experience. So while they're amazing and they're sort of an option for sure, I mean, I've been out to probably 12, 15 restaurants since lockdown stopped. And I don't plan to stop anytime soon. The experience you have is you know, it's not even unparalleled. So I do think it's another revenue stream. It's another business, but it isn't the same as a restaurant, not in terms of revenue or in terms of volume. And I think it's a very, very different model. So I think in the very, very casual sector, so burgers, pizzas, things like that, it could go on for quite long. But I don't think it's going to start competing with restaurants and so forth. And, you know, I think they're very, very different model. One is retail, and then one is hospitality. So I don't think, you know, they belong in the same conversation. They're you know, needs must, I'm afraid. And I think a lot of restaurateurs have had to do it for cash flow reasons, but I don't think it's going to replace the romance and the hospitality side of it by any means. Yeah.
David, thank you for being a great guest on the Lockdown BBQ Show.
Not at all. Thank you for having us.
Thanks, David, and I'll look forward to visiting Smokestak again soon.
Look forward to having you boys. Keep in touch, man. All the best.
Elky, David is such an inspiration for anybody who wants to start their own restaurant.
Oh, he really is, yeah. He's a top guy, and it's a top restaurant, and I can't wait to be eating there again soon.
Let's hope so. Now, Elky, your dish of the week is pretty special, and we're going to split it into two parts. Elky, what was it like doing the cook?
It was really good fun. I do enjoy this type of cook. Obviously, there's a bit of added pressure being sent these glorious cuts of meat that Smokestak serve up and trying to do them justice. With video, there is no hiding place, so you either nail it or you don't. Hopefully, I've nailed it, but we'll find out. It's two parts today. Let's take a look at part one. This week's dish of the week is something a bit different. We're going to be cooking a Smokestak box from Philip Warren Butchers. Let's crack on. Earlier on in the show, you saw that we had David Carter from Smokestak. Fantastic guy, fantastic restaurant, fantastic food. So Philip Warren Butchers supply a lot of the meat to Smokestak, certainly the brisket points, the short ribs, the pork collar, and they've put together a box which is available on Warren's on the Pass, and it includes the brisket point, the short ribs, the pork collar. I've been sent this box. I'm going to try and do it justice. I'm going to do my best to make it look and resemble and taste anything like it does at Smokestak, because once you've eaten at Smokestak, you'll know what I mean. It's absolutely banging. So let's crack on. So here are the delights of the Smokestak box for Philip Warren's. We've got this 3-bone short rib, Jacob's ladder. We've got this brisket point, and we've got this half pork shoulder or pork collar. Traditionally, low and slow, you would cook your brisket, your pork shoulder, probably overnight. I've had many sleepless nights cooking brisket and pork shoulder. What if I told you there was a way that you can have this ready in half the time and it was going to taste just as good? You won't believe me, right? But I'm going to show you. So I'm not going to do a lot of prep to these. I'm going to be cooking these, the brisket point and the shoulder, using what's known as the hot and fast method. Now, we don't want to spend 15, 16, 18 hours cooking these overnight, losing sleep. Hot and fast, you can do this in half that time. I've done these brisket points before in between 5 and 6 hours. So we're going to cook both of these at 300 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about 150 C. Normally for low and slow, you go about 225 Fahrenheit, which is about 110 centigrade. So we're going to be cooking these faster. So after about 3 hours, once we start to get a bit of bark on here, a bit of colour on both of these, we're going to wrap them, and then we're going to increase the temperature to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's going to allow these to cook in a much quicker time than you would do normally low and slow. And I'll show you the end result once we see the end result. I'm going to be cooking these two in the Big Joe at 300 Fahrenheit. I'm going to be cooking these short ribs around 250, 275 Fahrenheit. All I'm going to do to these, salt and pepper, and on this we're just going to go with a bit of barbecue rub. Now normally on the pork butt, on the pork shoulder, you would trim a lot of this fat off. I'm not going to. I'm going to be cooking it fat side down. So the fat is going to protect us from the high heat because we're cooking it hot and fast. So we're going to cook it fat side down, and then at the end we're just going to take the fat off. So I'm going to leave that as is. Short ribs, they've been nicely trimmed already. There's a bit of fat on here. I'm not bothered about that. Again, we want this to be nice and easy so you can cook at home. So I'm going to leave those as they are. The brisket point, we've got a bit of trimming to do, but we're going to trim this fat. It's not going to go to waste. We're going to render this down for some lovely beef fat, for beef fat chips, beef fat roast potatoes, whatever you want. So I'm just going to quickly trim this and get it ready for the smoker. So that's our brisket point trimmed, and all I'm going to do with this is just 50-50 salt and pepper. That's all it needs. Good quality beef like this, you don't need to chuck a load of other stuff on there, just salt and pepper and let the flavour of that grass-fed beef shine through. So a good liberal coating of this all over. Short ribs, we're just going to do the same, salt and pepper all over. Onto the pork. Pork loves a bit of sweetness. Beef, I like to keep nice and savoury, salt and pepper. Pork loves a bit of sweetness. So take your favourite barbecue rub. I'm using one here that's got sugar, salt, paprika, chilli, garlic, brown sugar, black pepper, cumin, all flavours that pork absolutely loves. So I'm going to chuck a load of this over the pork. Again, be generous. And that's it, that's the pork ready. So let's get these over to the Kamado Joes and introduce them to some smoke. To monitor the cooks, I'm going to be using the signals for the brisket and the pork, and I'm going to be using the smoke for the short ribs. So we've got a temperature probe in the fattest part of the brisket, temperature probe in the fattest part of the pork. We're going to pop the lid down now, and we're not going to do anything to these for 3 hours. See you again then. Again with these, I'm not going to touch these for the first 3 or 4 hours, so we'll see you again in 3 hours. Okay, so we're 3 hours in. The beef ribs have been cooking at 125 Celsius, which is about 250 Fahrenheit. They've hit an internal temperature of 80 Celsius. So I'm going to wrap these now. It's got to 80 a bit quicker than I thought, but it's kind of stalled at 80. So I'm going to wrap these now just to finish them off. So they're probably going to take another couple of hours anyway. So I'm going to wrap these in butcher paper and then stick them back on. So 3 hours and 45 minutes in, quick update. The brisket is sat at about 73 Celsius. The pork shoulder sat at about 71. It's time to wrap these until they're done. So I'm going to wrap these in butcher paper, just as we did with the short ribs. And the next time you see me or you hear me talking, these are going to be at about 91, 92 Celsius, and we're going to start probing them for tenderness. And as soon as they have no resistance, they probe like butter, we're going to take these off and rest them. But into the paper, back in they go. And also, when they go back in, we're going to crank this, if you can see it, there we go. We're going to crank this up to 350 Fahrenheit, which is about 170 Celsius. And that's going to get us through until they're done. So yes, the short ribs are done. Let me show you what I mean when I say probing like butter. Holding the Thermapen like this, and look, it's just slipping in, no resistance whatsoever, all the way through to that bone. So yes, and between the bones, you want to just check between the bones that it probes like butter. Look, no resistance whatsoever. So they are done. So I'm going to wrap them back up and we're going to put them in a cool box until the other bits are done. But they are looking beautiful. It's going to be some good eating.
We'll continue with Elky's dish of the week later on in the show. Now, Elky, the aroma coming off your barbecue must have been insane.
Oh mate, my shack smelt like my idea of barbecue heaven that day. It was a good day. Now, moving on, let's take a look at what our viewers have been cooking over the last week or so.
Now, this is the 4th week of our What's Cooking competition. Elky, which was your favourite dish?
I feel there's so much pressure on my shoulders picking my favourite each week, but this week I'm going to go with Will's Grill Shack with that absolutely filthy burger. So Will's Grill Shack is going to go into the hat with twisted ribs barbecue, stoke and smoke barbecue, and brown and slow. So I've got the 4 in my hat, so to speak, here. So we're going to pick a winner at random, and that winner is, drum roll, brown and slow. So brown and slow, massive congratulations. You win the Thermapen Pro. I'll be in touch to get your details, and the Thermapen Pro will be on its way to you.
Congratulations, Bro and Slow. Now it's time for Elky's how-to.
In this week's how-to, I'll show you the optimum way to set up your kettle barbecue for low and slow cooking. The humble kettle barbecue. Many a barbecue enthusiast journey has begun with one of these. They are fantastic all-rounders for grilling, but you can also smoke on them as well. And I'm going to show you the optimum way to set this up to smoke low and slow. So we're going to use what's called the snake method. Now this means that we have briquettes going around the perimeter of the barbecue. So you'll have the meat over here on the indirect side, and then here where your heat is, you'll have a few coals to start the snake here. And then it's just going to burn around slowly around the perimeter. You'll have your wood chunks or wood chips or whatever you're using on top. And it's a great way to set up for low and slow on your kettle barbecue. So let's show you how we do it. Now, briquettes are generally recommended for the snake method just because they're kind of uniform in shape. It's easier to get a nice uniform snake around the edges of your barbecue. I have done it before with lumpwood charcoal. You can do it with lumpwood. You just want to make sure that you pack it nice and tightly around the perimeter, so there's no big gaps, because what you don't want to happen is that it to hit a gap, the temperature's just going to drop and it's not going to carry on burning round. With briquettes, you can get a nice uniform snake, nicely packed in, and I'm going to show you how we do that. So what we do is take our briquettes and just start stacking them nice and tightly around the perimeter, like so. You want them nice and compact and close together, so when they burn through, the next lot catch. So you just build it around like so. So as you can see, we're setting up a nice snake shape around the perimeter. You can go 2 wide, 3 wide. We're going to put more on top as well, but we're just going to keep going around at the minute, making sure they're nice and tightly packed. You can see it's fairly easy. It obviously takes a little bit longer than just dumping in a load of charcoal, but we want a nice longer burn. So again, just pack them in nice and neat, and it really is as easy as that. So all we'll do now is just take a handful of lick holes, put them at this end so it starts the chain, starts the snake. That's going to burn round. If you start to run out towards the end, you can obviously put more charcoal around so it can just continue to burn, and then you move the meat over this side and let it burn around this way. Depends how long your cook's going to be for, really. Obviously, if you want to get some smoke on your meat, then just take some wood chunks and just dot those in around the way, and they're just going to catch as and when it burns around the snake. So that's my how-to this week. I hope you found it useful. It's a great introduction into the world of smoking and low and slow cooking without having to go out and spend hundreds of pounds on a dedicated smoker. Have a play around with your kettle barbecue, learn your temperatures, learn how the fire acts, learn how your meat reacts to different temperatures, different cooking temperatures, learn air control. It really is a great way to learn, and will put you on the path to greatness. Hope you found this useful. See you next week.
Elky, I've never used the snake method before. I think I need to give it a go.
Definitely, it's a convenient way to keep your kettle barbecue smoking along for a longer period of time. You should give it a go, mate. But in the meantime, let's take a look at what you've been cooking.
I know there are a lot of paella aficionados out there who might not be too happy on my take on this classic Spanish dish. I'm going to make a simple chicken and chorizo paella on my kettle grill. It's quick to make, pretty cost effective, and it's delicious. You will need 350 grams of paella rice, 750 grams of boneless chicken thighs, 170 grams of chorizo, 1 carrot, 1 onion and a red pepper, 100 grams of frozen peas, 200 grams of frozen peeled and cooked prawns, 1 lemon, a bunch of parsley, 2 cloves of garlic chopped, a teaspoon of smoked paprika, 1 tablespoon of tomato puree and 2 chicken stock pots. Finally, a pinch of salt and pepper. Preheat your barbecue, add a little oil and toss the roughly chopped onion, garlic and carrot into the pan. Next, add the chicken thighs, pepper and chorizo and fry for a few minutes. Measure out the smoked paprika and tomato puree and put in the pan and cook for a further 2 minutes. This is my favourite bit. Add the paella rice and stir thoroughly so that it absorbs all the cooking juices. The smell is insanely good. Next, add the stock pots, 750 millilitres of boiling water and season to taste. Stir thoroughly and let it simmer for 10 minutes. Stir in the frozen peas and prawns and cook for a further 5 minutes, then it's done. Scatter the chopped parsley over the paella and serve with a lemon wedge on the side for squeezing over this lovely creation. Absolutely beautiful and a reminder of hot summer days in Spain. Those were the days.
Now, my dish was quick and easy to make. Now, Elky, the duration of your dish of the week cook was slightly different.
It was, yes, but I do like the longer cooks for multiple reasons. One of those being that you get to be in the garden longer and you get to drink beers longer. See? Tactics, mate, tactics. Now let's have a look at how I got on in part 2 of Dish of the Week. It's blowing an absolute gale here. The sun is shining, but it's windy. But these have been on for 5.5 hours, just 5.5 hours, and I think they're nearly done. The short ribs were on for 4.5, nearly 5 hours. These were on for 5.5. So we've got brisket and pulled pork potentially in 5.5 hours. But we're just gonna open these up, give them a probe with this. We want them probing nice and soft, no resistance. So let's check and see if we're onto a winner. Right, so I've got juices running everywhere, absolutely everywhere. This is soft as you like. You do sacrifice a bit of bark, I find. It's windy here, what can I say? You do sacrifice a bit of bark, I find, when you do it hot and fast, but look at this. Look how windy it is behind me. Look at this, 5.5 hours compared to 16 hours for a bit of bark. I'll take that. Right, so we're gonna go in to test for tenderness. You wanna be able to hold your Thermapen like this and just let it slide in with no resistance, which is exactly what it's doing. I'm happy with that. So I'm gonna wrap this back up and we're gonna let this rest now for a couple of hours. This is really important. It needs to rest. You need all these juices to stay in the brisket. If you slice into that now, all your juices are gonna run out. It's gonna contract, it's gonna dry up. So we're gonna wrap this back up and we're gonna stick it in the cool box along with the short ribs, and then we'll take a look at the pork shoulder. And again, with this, we're just gonna take the Thermapen, make sure it slides in, which it is, no resistance. So again, this is done. It's nice and wobbly. 5.5 hours, they're done. So again, I'm gonna wrap this back up. We're gonna let this rest along with the brisket, and then we're gonna come back in 2 hours. We're gonna slice into the brisket. We're gonna get our hands into that. We're gonna slice into the short ribs, see exactly how we've done, because you're never quite sure until you slice in and you have your first look. So wrap these up and I'll see you in 2 hours. In this treasure chest lies the fruits of our labour. Oh, aren't they gorgeous? Twins. We're going to take a look at the short ribs first. These have been resting for 3.5 hours, a little bit longer than I would normally rest them. We're still hot, we're still good. The pork was pretty tricky to move out without it falling apart, so we know it's soft, we know it's ready to fall apart. I mean, just moving it there, you can see it's close to falling apart. And now the brisket. 3 very special cuts of meat here, guys. We've got the short rib, we've got the half pork shoulder or pork collar, and we've got the brisket point. Let's go in and have a slice. Feels soft, knife just gliding through it. Just take that rib away there and just show you what we've got. And what we've got is an absolute winner. Look at this, really soft meat. It felt soft when I took it out of the smoker, so I knew this was going to be a winner. Don't want to squeeze it too much, don't squeeze those juices out, but just look at that. Absolutely beautiful. Short ribs were a success, so that's 1 down, 2 to go. Pork shoulder, this is half a shoulder. Pork collar, again, Smokestak served these up. I've cooked this in 5.5 hours, as you've seen. Now, we want to make sure this bone slides out cleanly, and we want to make sure this pork falls apart nice and easily whilst remaining juicy. Whew. So let's crack on and see if we've done it. So first off with the bone. I mean, didn't even need to put any force on that, that just absolutely slipped out. So that's a good start. Now into the pork. It was kind of falling apart when I moved it from the board to this, so I know it's falling apart. I mean, just look at this for falling apart. I think we can safely say 5.5 hours, we've got juicy, tender, falling apart pulled pork. But let's just get our hands in, pull a bit more just to show. Just go straight in. Look at this. Look at it. I am very happy with that. 5.5 hours. No 16-hour overnight cook, 18-hour overnight cook. When no pressure at all being applied to this. You can see how juicy it is, how easy it pulls apart. So I'm not going to go too nuts. I'm going to cover this back up because I want to serve it up, and the more you pull it apart, it's going to lose its moisture quicker. But when we do pull this, a little trick, just add the barbecue rub that we put on there earlier, just add a little bit of that in there, because obviously we cook this fat side down, we've sacrificed the fat, we're going to take that off. So any lost bark that we might have otherwise had, we're going to make up for with a little bit of the rub. I'm going to put a little bit of hot sauce in there, but you can tell, you know, that's an absolute winner. 2 down, 1 to go. Some might say this is the main event. I think it's the main event. I'm going to go ahead, just slice it in half, show you what we've got. I don't know what we've got, so let's just go in, slice in half. I mean, it's soft as anything. Winner. Just come in and have a look at this. 3 out of 3. I think we've nailed it. It's juicy. I mean, the smell is incredible, but the moisture coming out of this, don't even have to squeeze it and it's dripping. And again, 5.5 hours. Let's get it all together on a little smokestack platter. They say the proof is in the pudding, but I think you'll find the pudding here is good. And you've seen this has taken 5.5 hours on the brisket, 5.5 hours on the pulled pork, 4.5 hours on the short ribs, and we've achieved amazing results. I mean, nobody's going to be unhappy eating this. I'm going to have meat sweats in about 5 minutes. So guys, that was my dish of the week. Slight alternative to dish of the week. I just wanted to champion British produce, but also show you that barbecue doesn't have to be difficult. It can be as difficult or as easy as you make it. If you're worried about cooking your first brisket, give one of these a go and do it in 5.5 hours. What have you got to lose? You're not going to lose sleep. You're not going to have a sleepless night. I've just shown you how easy it was. All I did was trim a bit of the fat off, put some salt and pepper on, put it in a smoker, wrap it after a few hours until it's done. It's that easy. I mean, if I can do it, you can do it. All of this is available from Philip Warren Butchers. I believe on Warren's on the Pass, so have a look on there. If it's out of stock, because again, they are sought after, sign up to the newsletter. Get yourself some of this, because I'm telling you, it's unreal. So that was my alternative to dish of the week. I really hope you've enjoyed it. I certainly have. I'm off to get some meat sweats, and I'll see you again next week.
Now, Elky, that's the biggest cook we've had on the show so far. Did you have a party to eat it all?
Let's just say I've got some very lucky friends. Now, if you want to get hold of any of these cuts of meat, then hit up Philip Warren's Butchers. Warren's on the Pass. Details below.
Now, Elky, would you like to introduce our special guest for next week?
Yep, so our special guest next week is somebody who's been cooking the books for the last few years. It's Nathan, aka Kung Fu Barbecue.
Now, I think that's going to be really good. And that's about it for this week's show. Thank you very much for watching. A big thank you to our programme sponsor, Kamado Joe, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah, and again, a huge thanks from me, guys. Keep those fires burning, and we'll see you next week.